Hey guys. This is Urizi. New series on this channel after a while. This what if Naruto have Artemis inside his soul? When her fight with Atlas is interrupted by Luke using the power of Kronos, Artemis, goddess of the hunt and moon, finds herself in the apartment of a familiar whiskered blonde. Low on power, badly hurt, and possibly being hunted, the huntress decides to hide inside the most unlikeliest of places, Naruto's soul. Only one problem. She isn't alone in there. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. This part will cover chapters 1 to 5. Let's start. Chapter 1. Clang, crash, crock-a-boom, clang, clang. Atop a blackened mountain, several figures could be seen locked in combat, as a massive dark fortress seemed to be slowly building itself around them. A young girl with pitch black hair, wearing punk clothes, and wielding a spear and shield fought against an older teen boy with sandy blonde hair with an odd dual-colored sword. Another girl with similar black hair, a silvery hunting outfit, and a silver circlet on her brow was crouched next to an injured and bound blonde girl, shooting an expertly made silver-lined hunting bow towards our main focus. A seemingly young girl with auburn hair, silver eyes, and lightly tanned skin littered with cuts that oozed gold and blood struggled to support two silver hunting blades as they blocked a massive bronze javelin. Said javelin was wielded by a tall, excessively muscular man wearing golden Greek armor with an arrogant smirk. These were Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, chastity, and the moon, and Atlas, the titan of strength and endurance respectively. Do you now see the futility of your actions now, little goddess? Atlas asked in a mocking tone as he slapped away an arrow that got close to his head and began to slowly apply more pressure. Artemis didn't verbally respond. Instead, she broke the blade lock and used the momentum to slip past his guard and slash at his back, withholding a groan as her weapons barely cut into his armor. Soon you and your little companions shall be nothing more than a memory, a really bloody memory. He emphasized this with a grazing blow of his spear, making a long, shallow cut along Artemis's arm. Damn it, I don't have enough time. I doubt Poseidon's son can hold the sky for much longer. Artemis thought, briefly glancing behind the titan to see a boy with spiky black hair and seafoam green eyes as he struggled to literally hold the sky in the air. She knew that it was only a matter of minutes before the weight became too much for him, and he was crushed. The goddess of the hunt was snapped out of her thoughts as she instinctually dodged out of the way of a jab that would have skewered her torso. Don't you know better than to get distracted during a fight? But of course, what would a pathetic woman know of real fighting anyway, Oh my, did I hurt your feelings? Are you gonna cry to daddy now? Atlas said in a mocking sad tone as he smirked at the suddenly immobile goddess. Snap! Faster than the mighty titan could even blink, Artemis was right in front of his face with her now brightly glowing blades lodged deep into his shoulders, her face set into one of cold fury, as she then proceeded to slash and hack at every bit of exposed flesh she could reach. Gah! Damn bitch! Get the fuck off me! Atlas screamed as he tried to pry the pissed goddess off his face, only for his hands to get repelled with wild stabs and slashes whenever they got near. Finally having enough, he changed tactics and barreled straight through several walls and then body slamming head first into the floor, creating a moderately sized crater. Slowly getting back to his feet with a sneer as the wounds across his face swiftly healed shut, the general raised his weapon high to strike at the dazed goddess. Enjoy the taste of oblivion, you little GHH. Atlas was cut off as a single silver arrow lodged itself into one of the still healing wounds on his hand, causing him to lose his grip on the javelin as it fell to the ground with a clatter. Grr! I was going to save you for last, my traitorous offspring, he growled out as he slowly turned towards the bow-wielding girl with a snarl. But now I'm gonna rip you limb from limb, Gaia, damn it! He howled as Artemis lodged her blades deep into his back. Caught by surprise, he was unable to resist in time as she shoved him towards the struggling boy. Realizing what she was doing, the titan's power flared as he tried to stop himself before it was too late. Having none of this, Artemis funneled her energy into her arms and pushed. Lady Artemis! Look out! Head snapping in the direction of the two shouts, the goddess was just in time to see the blonde boy just a few feet away with his odd sword descending towards her head with a sickly yellow glow. Pulling one of her knives free, she raised it up just in time to block the blade a mere inch from her head. "You shall not stop us! Olympus shall fall!" the boy yelled as the glow around his sword brightened dramatically. Artemis's eyes widened dramatically as she got a good feel of the energy that the blade was giving off. Kronos. Knowing how dangerous her grandfather's power could be, the goddess was about to pull her blade back when a bright light suddenly blinded everyone in the vicinity. When the light cleared, Atlas was lying face first in the ground with the sky on his back, the boy that was just in his place not too far away gasping desperately for breath, and the blonde boy stood with his blade embedded into the ground. Artemis was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, today sucked, a short boy with spiky blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, tan skin, and 3 whisker-like markings on each cheek groaned as he marched into a small apartment. Slamming the door shut behind him, he shuffled across the room and flopped into a small recliner with a tired sigh. This was Naruto Uzumaki, 12-year-old orphan, prankster king from hell, self-declared future Hokage, and current failure of the Ninja Academy. For the second time now, he had failed the final test because he still couldn't preform a Bunshin no Jutsu, the most basic of clone techniques. Stupid jutsu, why doesn't it ever work for me? He wondered aloud. No matter how much he practiced, no matter how long he trained, that jutsu would always turn out a flop whenever he attempted the technique. The best he had ever gotten was a single dead-looking clone that would collapse immediately after forming. The worst part for him was how all the other students would laugh like crazy each time he failed, mocking and teasing him while he just stood there with a fake smile, declaring he would prove that he would be the best. He loved the attention, hell he practically lived for it, but just once he wanted someone to pay attention because they were proud of him. Well, there's always tomorrow, Naruto thought with a smile as he stood back up. His apartment was small, only consisting of a living room with attached kitchenette, a bathroom, and a bedroom. It never bothered him though, it was his home and he was happy with the way it was. Right now, he was shuffling around the kitchenette, looking around for his favorite comfort food. Opening the cupboard, his smile turned to a frown as he saw only a single package of instant ramen sitting all by its lonesome. Grown great, have to go shopping later, Naruto grumbled as he grabbed the solitary package and set it on the counter as he got to work boiling some water. 5 minutes later, he was back in his recliner with a steaming cup of ramen in hand and a rare relaxed expression on his face as he watched a cheesy action movie on his small TV. Gently blowing on the ramen to cool it down, Naruto used a pair of disposable chopsticks to raise the noodly goodness to mouth. Just as he was about to take his first bite though, he was blinded by a sudden flash of yellow and silver light as a sudden weight fell onto his lap. When his vision cleared, he found himself looking straight into the silver eyes of a visibly stunned unknown girl as she straddled his lap. Pretty, was the last thing he thought before he felt a sudden jolt of pain in his neck and everything went black. Artemis looked down at the unconscious boy beneath her. She had knocked him out purely by reflex, but not before she had seen the surprise and confusion in his eyes as he looked at her. He had clearly not known who she is, so was likely not an enemy. That being said, where in Tartarus am I? She wondered as she looked around the small apartment with confusion. Attempting to focus her power into her senses, Artemis suddenly collapsed due to her exhaustion having caught up with her. Relifting herself off the blonde beneath her, the goddess's equivalent of adrenaline finally wore off and she felt her numerous injuries ache. Her breathing became uneven, her vision started blurring, and her entire body trembled violently as realization finally hit her. She was almost completely out of energy, only having enough to barely keep herself conscious. With this came the harsh truth: she was entirely defenseless, badly injured, and in an entirely unknown area. I need to get somewhere safe to regain my strength before making my way back to Olympus, she thought as she tried to climb off the boy only to collapse again. Yeah, how in Tartarus am I supposed to do that when I can barely move? Artemis knew she didn't have the time to waste. It probably wouldn't be long before Kronos' followers sent someone or something to hunt her down while she was weakened. Think, Artemis, think, she said to herself as she took a deep breath. You're wounded, exhausted, and probably being hunted. Huh, so this is what my prey feel like, gah. Focus! I need somewhere to hide, somewhere to rest, somewhere nobody would think to look. Her thoughts ground to a halt as she looked down at the boy she landed on, an idea slowly forcing itself to the front of her mind. As a goddess, she had many abilities, most of which were linked to her respective domains. However, there was one that all gods she knew of could, but almost never did use. Desperate times call for desperate measures, I guess. She thought with a sigh while leaning down until she was face to face with the unconscious child. You should be honored, as you will be allowed a privilege that no man has ever had. She told him despite knowing he couldn't hear, before doing something that would make every one of her hunters have a heart attack. She kissed him. The moment their lips connected, however, her entire body glowed a bright silver and dispersed into particles that soaked into the boy's body. The only proof she was ever there being a few drops of golden ichor. Chapter 2. Inside what appeared to be a dimly lit sewer tunnel, a swarm of silver particles collected until they formed the familiar childlike shape of the goddess of the hunt. Panting in exhaustion, Artemis slowly took in her new surroundings. Rather grungy for a child's soul, she commented with mild concern before slowly stumbling to the side of the tunnel and sitting down against the brick wall with a tired sigh, glad that the water her legs were submerged in appeared to be mostly clean. Focusing the absolute last of her strength, a light blue translucent aura formed in the air and started sinking into her body as she began gently siphoning the ambient energy all around into herself. Nifty fact, all living things had a soul, and that soul was practically a bundle of pure energy condensed into one spot. If one knew how and had the means to do so, they could harness this power in a variety of ways. In this case, Artemis was cautiously draining a small amount of this energy at a continuous rate from the boy to restore her own power as she rested. This was why other gods and goddesses never used this ability, as they found the idea of needing a mere mortal's power insulting and or blasphemous. Imagine her surprise though when she was met with the veritable sea of energy emanating from the boy. Just my luck, a demigod, she thought. That was the only explanation she could think of for how a mere child had so much raw power overflowing from him. What was odd, however, was she couldn't tell whose child he was, something she could do almost instinctually due to her being the goddess of the hunt, but simply chalked it up to her present state of fatigue. Deeming it not important for the time being, Artemis finally allowed her eyes to close as she fell asleep for the first time in 300 years. Because of that, she missed both the aura around her gaining slight flecks of reddish purple and how a series of black lines started forming on the walls, pulsing with a vibrant blue light. Elsewhere in the sewer/Soul's Cape, the lines kept forming until they reached an unimaginably massive gateway. It was at least 4 stories tall and half as wide, and on the middle bars where the gate would open was a single piece of paper with the kanji for Seo written on it. Transitioning to the floor, the lines shot toward these bars and rapidly curled up until they reached the paper. When they made contact, the paper started glowing the same color before it gave off a sudden burst of light. When it cleared, it revealed a beautiful woman with vibrant red hair that reached her waist, violet eyes, and wearing a green dress with white collar and short sleeves. She looked around the area in apparent confusion until they settled on the glowing lines. In less than a second, her confusion turned to rage, her hair rising into the air in 9 waving bunches as massive golden chains emerged from her back and shot down the tunnel the lines originated from. Back with Artemis. The goddess of the moon was awoken from her slumber, as several golden chains suddenly wrapped themselves around her. Surprised, Artemis had no chance to try and break free before she was repeatedly bashed into the floor and walls until she lost consciousness again. Unknown amount of time later. Artemis's eyes slowly flickered open as she sat up with a groan. Sitting up from the shallow water she was laying in, she winced from a strong jolt of pain that shot through her skull. On reflex, she started to reach up with one hand to rub her head. Clatter. Only to freeze as she saw the golden metal chain now bound to her wrist. What in Tartarus? She mentally shouted as she looked herself over and found similar bindings on her other wrist, both her ankles, her waist, and around her neck. Following the chains with her eyes, she was just in time to see a red-headed woman as she finished wrapping the ends of the chains around the bars of a massive gate in an extremely complex pattern. When she finished, the chains gained a slight blue and red aura before returning to normal. Turning around, the redhead's violet eyes locked with hers before a vicious grin crossed her lips. "Well, well, look who's finally awake," she said in a mocking tone as she slowly approached the restrained goddess while loudly cracking her knuckles. "Now, little miss." She grabbed Artemis by the collar and hoisted her to eye level. "While I'd love nothing more than to pummel you until you answer my questions, such as what the hell you're doing inside my son's mind, I don't have that kind of time." As if to prove her point, her body began flickering out of existence for a few moments before stabilizing. "But given how you were sucking up Naruto-chan's chakra like a leech, I can guess you aren't here for good reasons." Artemis tried to speak but was unable to as the woman's grip tightened drastically around her neck. "Not only that, thanks to you I won't ever be able to see my baby boy once he's older. And that really pisses me off, Tebane." All Artemis could do was choke out incoherent noises as she grasped desperately at her throat, her face beginning to pale. "But given that I can't kill you, and trust me I tried many times while you were out cold, I did the next best thing," the redhead explained as her form started flickering at a much more rapid pace. "I hope you like it here, 'cause you're going to be staying for a long, long time." As soon as she finished speaking, the woman faded away completely, allowing Artemis to fall back to the ground with a splash. For several minutes, all she could do was lay there with her hands at her throat as she desperately gasped for breath. When she finally did recover, the goddess slowly stood up on slightly shaky legs as her restraints jingled loudly. Looking down at said restraints, a look of anger crossed her face as she scoffed. "I may be weakened, but did that woman really think mere chains would hold a goddess?" she asked rhetorically as she started to pull at the chains with her godly string. "Zzzzzzzzzzjaya." She collapsed back to the ground in agony as the arrangement of chains lit up like a Christmas tree with red and blue electricity coursed up the bindings and into her body. Artemis writhed around in the water as the volts kept flooding through her for several seconds before tapering out. This left her on the ground gasping, again. "I guess those mere chains are more problematic than you thought, huh, goddess?" A booming voice called out, saying goddess in a mocking tone. Turning her head towards the source, the goddess of the hunt's eyes widened dramatically as she saw the massive creature on the other side of the bars. It was a giant fox with blood-red fur, equally red slit-pupilled eyes, black markings around its eyes and mouth, and 9 long tails. A deep growl emanated from its throat, causing the whole sewer to shake. The whole thing would have been more intimidating though if nearly every inch of the fox wasn't restrained by chains many times larger than the ones on her. The body was held to the floor while its tails were pinned to the walls of the cage. What are you?" Artemis asked in mild fright as she scurried away from the cage. She could feel the raw power rolling off it, and it was comparable to the mighty Typhon himself. "Me? I am the Kyubi no Kitsune, strongest of the Biju and pure hate incarnate. That is all you need to know, Nigen," it said blandly before seemingly going to sleep. Seeing as she probably wasn't going to get anything other than that, Artemis decided not to press her luck and chose to focus on gathering her strength instead. Placing herself as far as possible from the Kyubi, she found a small, raised platform that stuck out of the shin-high water that she laid down on. Examining her restraints, she noticed as a trace amount of the red energy was seeping from them into herself. While this was giving her strength, she also felt a similar amount of her own power being drained from herself and released into the surrounding area, represented by a soft silver glow. Sighing in frustration, Artemis attempted to get as comfortable as she could on the slab of stone with the metallic bindings on her. Setting her head down, she drifted back into an uneasy slumber. Morning, Naruto's apartment. Naruto woke up with a yawn, rubbing his eyes tiredly as he sat up in his recliner with mild confusion. What am I doing out here?" he wondered aloud, rubbing the sleep out of one eye as he looked around his living room before spotting the still turned on television as it played static. "Oh, must have dozed off." With that mystery solved, he stood and stretched the kinks out of his muscles before throwing away the now inedible cup of ramen with a sad look. Looking up at the clock hanging on the wall, he found it to be 8:27 in the morning. Well, time for a shower, then shopping, he thought with a grimace. At least I don't have to worry about school for a few weeks. Yon, what is all this racket? Naruto yelped as he heard the unfamiliar voice ring through his head. Who said that? He demanded as his eyes darted all over the room. Ugh! Stop with that yelling, boy, I already have a headache as it is, the voice said in an irritated tone. Hey! Don't tell me what to do! Naruto yelled as he continued to search all over the place for the source of the voice. Who are you? Where are you? What are you doing in my home? He demanded. You can stop looking, you won't find me anywhere, boy. And I said stop yelling. The voice yelled back, making Naruto cringe as the sound echoed through his skull. Fine, but at least answer my questions. And stop calling me boy, my name's Naruto Uzumaki and you better remember it to bail. Mindscape. Artemis's eyebrow twitched as she saw everything Naruto saw thanks to a large hologram-like screen floating in front of her. So that woman really was his mother, she thought as her hand reflexively went to her still bruised throat. Reality. Alright then, boy, Naruto grit his teeth, my name is Artemis. As for where I am, here's a hint, I know exactly what you're thinking. What I'm thinking? But that impossible unless you were in my head. Wait a minute, Naruto's eyes widened as it hit him. You're in my head? Exactly, the now named Artemis stated bluntly. Why are you in my head? Get out! Naruto yelled while gripping his head. Trust me, I would love to do exactly that, but I can't. Why not? What did I just tell you about yelling? Naruto's jaw snapped shut just as he was about to yell again when he heard the dangerous tone in Artemis's voice. Also think when you're talking to me, otherwise others are going to think you're going crazy. Well, last I checked, hearing voices inside your head was a pretty sure sign of someone going crazy. Naruto thought back in a snarky tone. Touché, but still, I highly doubt you want people noticing so. Not unless you want a one-way venture to an insane asylum, Artemis said, causing Naruto to grumble in reluctant agreement. Alright, you do have a point there. Great, I'm agreeing with the voice in my head. Naruto groaned as he collapsed back into his chair. Congratulations, Naruto, you have officially gone crazy. Chapter 3. Last time. What did I just tell you about yelling? Naruto's jaw snapped shut just as he was about to yell again when he heard the dangerous tone in Artemis's voice. Also think when you're talking to me, otherwise others are going to think you're going crazy. Well, last I checked, hearing voices inside your head was a pretty sure sign of someone going crazy, Naruto thought back in a snarky tone. Touché, but still, I highly doubt you want people noticing so. Not unless you want a one-way venture to an insane asylum, Artemis said, causing Naruto to grumble in reluctant agreement. Alright, you do have a point there. Great, I'm agreeing with the voice in my head. Naruto groaned as he collapsed back into his chair. Congratulations, Naruto, you have officially gone crazy. And now. 1 year later. Beep, 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 click. A lightly tanned arm shot out from under a bundle of blankets and smacked the beeping alarm clock. A soft groan replaced the irritating noise as Naruto's head partially emerged from the mess with half-lidded eyes to glare at the glowing numbers on the clock. He stared at it for a full minute before collapsing back onto his bed. Ugh, 5 more minutes. Don't bother trying, Naruto, you need to be on time for the finals today. Artemis's voice called within his mind, making Naruto groan again. Now get up. Alright, I'm up, Artemis-chan, Naruto grumbled as he finally climbed out of bed. With the blankets no longer covering him and the fact he was only wearing a pair of boxer shorts, you could now see a few differences in his appearance. He was about an inch or so taller, his cheeks were a little less chubby, and his musculature was more toned and slimmer looking. However, the most noticeable changes would be to his hair and eyes. The former was from the streaks of auburn cropping out here and there, and the latter due to the multitude of silvery flecks now in them, giving his eyes a literal sparkle effect when in direct light. Stretching his arms with a yawn, Naruto slowly stumbled out of his room and into his living room, where he was greeted with the sight of a fair-skinned, black-haired, black-eyed, color not bruise, woman wearing a bluish-black kimono with white trim reading a small scroll. She was sitting on one side of a new-looking love seat sat in front of television along with an equally new coffee table that had 2 plates of food sat on it. Upon seeing her, Naruto instantly perked up before quickly rushing over and hugging the woman tightly around the waist. "Morning, Shizen-ichan," he said excitedly as the now-named Shizen looked down at him with a smile, while she rolled up her scroll and returned the affection. "Morning, Naruto, how are you and your roommate doing today?" she asked somewhat hesitantly after they separated while pointing towards her own head. As soon as the words left her lips, Naruto's eye color suddenly shifted, changing to almost pure silver with flecks of blue. "I do have a name, Shizen, I'd appreciate if you'd use it." Artemis's soft but strong voice came out of Naruto's mouth. "Sorry, Artemis, still getting used to all of this." Yep, she knew about Naruto's other soul roomie. "How?" you may ask. Well, that would be for the same reason she's in Konoha and not wandering around the elemental nations with Tsunade, the legendary sucker Senju. You see, it turns out housing the goddess of the moon inside your soul while some of her power is gradually being dispersed into your body has a few side effects. The hair and eyes were again the most obvious of them, but there were more less obvious but problematic issues. His muscle development was becoming more lean and compact, thus giving him a slightly feminine figure, and it was now a bit harder for Naruto to read as the kanji in books or scrolls would seem to become slightly distorted for him. The most prominent issue though was how the blonde redhead, Auburn is a reddish-brown, now felt completely restless and energetic at night, making it impossible for him to sleep no matter how hard he tried. It got so bad that it was only a matter of time that it drew attention, specifically from Naruto's favorite teacher Iruka. 10 months ago, Shinobi, Ninja, Academy. Iruka was a young man with darkly tanned skin, brown hair, and a long horizontal scar going across his nose. He was also a very dedicated teacher who cared deeply for the well-being of his students, especially given the profession they were training for. It was because of this that he didn't tolerate slacking off of goofing around from his students while they were in his class. So when he saw the trouble student, class clown, and resident prankster of his class Naruto with his face planted firmly against his desk while softly snoring during his lessons, again, he was understandably a bit upset. With a vein bulging on his forehead, he marched across the classroom while ignoring his other students whispering and snickering at the blonde's soon-to-be misfortune. When he got to Naruto's desk, he slammed his fist onto the boy's desk, making him shoot back up with a start. "Naruto! How many times have I told you not to sleep in class? You need to take this seriously." Iruka started his scolding strong but trailed off near the end as he got a good look at Naruto's face. Dark bags sat under his eyes, his face was pale, and overall looked ready to pass out again any second. "Sorry, Iruka-sensei. I'm just having some trouble getting enough thump just like that." Present. At first Iruka had thought Naruto had just been overworking himself and had told him off later for doing so at the nurse's office, despite the blonde claiming otherwise. It wasn't until a few days after that incident that he started to believe his student when he saw Naruto not only still sluggish and exhausted in class but stopped pretty much everything he usually did. No pranks, no ditching class, no hanging out with Kiba, Shikamaru, or Choji. His seemingly endless amounts of energy he was known for just seemed to be gone. The final nail in the coffin was when he missed going to Ichiraku's when they had a completely free ramen eating contest. After that, Iruka wasted no time bringing the matter to the Hokage, Fire Shadow, Hiruzen, the leader of Konohagakure, village hidden in the leaves, and Naruto's grandfather figure. Not even an hour later, Naruto found himself in a hospital room as several tests were being done on him to figure out what was wrong. They even had some weird guy with long white hair and red marks on his face examine his stomach for several minutes while he channeled chakra for some reason. After several days of exams, questions, and observation, not only had they not been able to figure out what was wrong, but that is when they started noticing all the other little changes he'd been going through. With the case only getting more complex as time passed, and in his worry for his surrogate grandson's health, Hiruzen called the one person who could possibly find out the problem to come back to the village, one Tsunade Senju, also known as the world's best medical nin. The big problem with that, Tsunade hated Konoha since her brother and lover both died while serving the village as shinobi. After their deaths, she had left with her lover's niece Shizen while vowing never to set foot in the place again. However, Hiruzen wasn't known as the professor for nothing and had quickly found a way to force her back, by striking her where it hurts the most for gamblers. 8.5 months ago, Hokage's office. Hiruzen sat calmly in his office smoking a pipe, dressed in the official Hokage attire with a relaxed expression on his wrinkled face as he stared expectantly at the door. He didn't even flinch when said door suddenly exploded into pieces of wooden shrapnel that went flying, embedding themselves several inches into the walls, floor, ceiling, and furniture while somehow completely missing him. Standing where the poor innocent carved chunk of oak used to be was a tall blonde woman with sharp brown eyes locked in a glare, pale skin, a diamond tattoo on her forehead, and a ridiculously large bust. Bow chicka bow wow. God damn it, Tucker, this is the wrong story. Dude, as long as there are hot ladies around, I'm always in the right story. Facepalm. She wore a short gray kimono with blue edging, short blue pants, and a long green jacket with the kanji for gamble inside a red circle on the back. Standing behind her with a nervous and apologetic expression was none other than Shizen, still wearing the same outfit, only now holding a small pig in her arms. Hiruzen! The woman yelled as she literally stomped into the office with the force of an elephant, shaking the whole building and leaving spiderweb cracks under each foot. Why the hell did you freeze up my bank accounts and force me to come back here? She demanded, slamming her hands so hard against his desk that if it wasn't for the reinforcement seals on it the whole thing would have been turned to splinters. I promise it is important, Hiruzen said in a calm, even tone, not once faltering under the wrath of his old student. There is an odd medical case that needs your expertise to figure out. No! Tsunade cut him off. There is no way I am helping this kami-forsaken village after all that it has taken from me. Hiruzen sighed at that while rubbing his forehead in annoyance. Tsunade, it has been almost 30 years since Dan and Iwaki's deaths, you need to. He was cut off once again, this time from a fist heading towards his face. Don't you dare say their GH. Tsunade had started to yell again, only for her to be cut off this time when Hiruzen stopped the punch cold by catching her wrist. Then, with blinding speed, the seemingly harmless old man struck her several times in the torso with Hyuga-like precision and speed using his free hand. Stunned and gasping for breath, the blonde woman was left completely defenseless to the chop against her forehead that sent her stumbling back until she fell into a chair that appeared behind her in a puff of smoke. Shut up. Stay seated. Listen. Hiruzen said sternly once she recovered, fixing Tsunade with a fierce glare and wave of killing intent, that froze her in place. As I was saying, it has been nearly 30 years since their deaths. You've had more than enough time to mourn and move on, yet instead you are insistent on spitting on their memory with your self-destructive lifestyle. Don't even bother denying it, you know that is exactly what you're doing, he said, his glare hardening even further when his student tried to argue back. I was planning on just having you do this case and then be on your way, but your reaction at even mentioning it has changed that. It was true, all he wanted was her to find out what was wrong with Naruto, and then she could leave. However, looking at his former student sitting before him, the old man decided it was finally time to put his foot down on another matter while she was here. From now on, you are considered an active kunoichi and your Sannin travel rights are hereby revoked. You will also be required to go see a therapist on a regularity of at least once every 2 weeks. If you try to leave for anything other than an authorized mission, I will not only have the Senju accounts liquidated and the money dispersed to the various clans of the village, but also have you marked as a missing nin. What? You can't do that! Tsunade screamed in horror as she stood up from her seat, only to get nailed right on her tattoo with a paperweight that knocked her right back down. I am the Hokage, my word is law, Hiruzen stated bluntly, making the woman growl angrily and grit her teeth, but she didn't move from her seat. Now on to the case you so quickly rejected. Opening one of the drawers of his desk, the old man pulled out a manila envelope that he then tossed over to still pissed woman. Tsunade caught it by reflex, holding it in the air for a few seconds before reluctantly bringing it closer and opening it. Pulling out the small stack of paper inside, she quickly glanced over the contents of the first page before her eyebrows started twitching. An insomnia case? All of this over a fucking kid having trouble sleeping? she asked through clenched teeth. At first glance that is what it would seem, yes, Hiruzen said, but I'd suggest you keep reading before allowing that temper of yours to get any hotter. Knowing there was no point in arguing at this point, Tsunade simply grumbled loudly while flipping the page. Her griping continued for a whole of 10 seconds after that before slowly tapering off as her eyes darted over the piece of processed wood. By the time she was finished with the third page, her anger had seemingly completely dissipated as she became completely focused on what was written with a raised brow while waving her apprentice over. In Uzumaki, go figure, they always have the weird conditions, better yet a Jinchuriki. A foreign silver-colored chakra presence not from the Kyuubi, which according to the pervert is under even heavier lockdown than it used to be somehow. Shifting body tone, changing eye and hair color, and unusual brain activity. Okay, I'll admit I'm interested. Present. After being effectively coerced into staying, Tsunade spent a day going over the various notes and test results before actually meeting with Naruto and doing some tests herself. Unfortunately, since she was still in a very bad mood from being forced to stay, she ended up making a snarky comment about the Hokage position while in the boy's presence. Given how Naruto aspired to be in said position, this went about as well as you could imagine. 8.5 months ago, hospital. It was the middle of the night, and Tsunade was standing over Naruto's bed with a clipboard, writing down some notes from the results of a jutsu she just used to scan the activity and chakra flow to his brain. The Hokage position is a fool's job, for those looking for an early grave. The busted blonde said pessimistically after hearing the boy talk about how he would become the leader of the village. Take that back, you stupid hag! Naruto shouted, looking and feeling a lot better now that he'd been able to get some sleep during the day. Looking down at him with a smug smirk, Tsunade leaned forward until she was face to face with the boy and said 2 words. Make me. Damn it, where the hell is room 315 again? Shizen asked herself as she wandered through the hospital with a large cup of coffee in hand. She'd been sent to fetch one by Tsunade and had ended up getting turned around in the large building. After several more minutes of searching, she finally gave up and stopped a nearby nurse to ask for directions. Oh, you want that boy's room? The nurse, an elderly woman with fair skin but graying brown hair, asked with a disgusted expression, like she just heard or saw something disgusting. Down that hall, take a left, 5th door to the left, she said quickly before hurrying away. Having been informed of her teacher's patient's other condition, Shizen had a good idea behind why the woman acted like that and had to restrain the urge to punch her. Instead, she just followed the directions she was given and soon arrived at the room she wanted. Upon entering, though, the cup in Shizen's grip slipped free and fell to the floor with a small crash as the raven-haired woman stared at the scene before her in shock. Af. Get the fuck off me, you little fucking bastard! Tsunade screamed, attempting to pry Naruto off of her chest while the boy gave her a double purple nurple. After that day, when the Umbu and medical staff who witnessed this told others of what happened, Naruto was unanimously declared the bravest person in all of Konoha. Present. Once she managed to separate the two, and prevent Tsunade from turning her patient into a bloody smear, Shizen introduced herself and managed to hit it off rather well with the energetic blonde. Naruto liking how Shizen was caring but also understanding, allowing him to get up and stretch his legs when he was feeling restless or simplifying things that he had trouble understanding. Meanwhile, Shizen liked Naruto for his blunt honesty and straightforward attitude. Naturally, it wasn't long until Naruto saw the kind woman as the sister he always wanted. Since then, she ended up acting as the mediator between him and Tsunade whenever they were in the same room. Whenever she left them alone, the two were at each other's throats within minutes. In the meantime, Tsunade was able to figure out what was wrong with his sleeping issue after a few weeks, along with other things. 6.5 months ago, Hokage's office. A second being also sealed inside of Naruto? Hiruzen asked Tsunade as he looked up from the report on his desk. It makes the most sense. There is no other way that foreign chakra would still be circulating in his chakra system otherwise. Tsunade said, I even had the Gaki completely isolated from anyone but myself and Shizen for an entire week just to make sure nobody was injecting the stuff into him manually. While she spoke, the blonde pulled out a specific sheet from the report for the Hokage to see. Not only did it remain consistent, the amount circulating has actually been increasing, roughly by an estimate of 0.05% every 3 weeks. Hiruzen's brow furrowed at this as he read over the data. Is there any way to get rid of it or stop it from getting worse? He asked, only to sigh when Tsunade shook her head. Not unless you want to seal off his entire chakra network, Tsunade said sarcastically. Besides, at this point it's doing him more good than bad. How in Kami's name is making him unable to sleep good? Hiruzen demanded sternly. Correction, he is unable to sleep, at night, Tsunade said with a smirk, making her sensei blink in surprise. Excuse me? Tsunade's grin widened at his baffled response. It wasn't every day one surprised the shinobi no Kami, god of shinobi. You heard me, he can't sleep at night. This silver chakra has altered the brain's neural and hormonal activity for sleeping, effectively making him nocturnal. She explained. It's actually a rather easy fix, just have to prescribe him a few meds for sleep. Hiruzen continued to stare at her blankly for several seconds before finally responding with a tired sigh. I'm getting too old for this shit, what do we do next then? At this point, Tsunade finally lost her smug look, being replaced with a frown. Next, we find the best Yamanaka you have and have them do something really stupid. You honestly don't mean? That's exactly what I mean. Few hours later, hospital. Just for the record, this is by far the stupidest thing you have ever asked me to do. One Inoichi Yamanaka, head of the Yamanaka clan, said as he stood inside a hospital room with Tsunade, Hiruzen, Jiraiya, white-haired man with red lines on face, and a very heavily sedated Naruto. You want me to send someone into a Jinchuriki's mind? Into the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's mind? Not just someone, me? Tsunade said, we need to find the source of that unknown chakra, and the only way we're going to be able to that is from within the Gaki's mind where the spiritual half of the seal resides. Or at least that's what the pervert says. She finished while jabbing her thumb at Jiraiya. I told you I'm not a pervert. I'm a super perv crash. Whatever you say, I just want it to be known that I think this is a very bad idea. The blonde man said, ignoring the twitching man in the wall while going through a quick string of hand seals and placing a hand on Tsunade and Naruto's shoulders. Main Dobodai Retenso no Jutsu, mind-body coil transfer technique. Noted. Was the last thing Tsunade heard from Hiruzen before everything went white. Mindscape seal. Artemis sat on her little platform with a bland look as she patiently waited for her company. Just because Naruto wasn't conscious doesn't mean his senses stopped working, so she was able to hear everything that had just been discussed. Sure enough, not even a minute later Tsunade's form appeared in a small flare of blue light, facing away from the seal. The busted blonde stumbled slightly from disorientation for a few seconds until her senses stabilized, and she caught herself. Once she got her bearings, Tsunade quickly started taking in her surroundings. I've heard of having your head in the gutter, but isn't this a little extreme? I had a similar thought when I first arrived here. The instant Artemis's voice reached the blonde's ears, Tsunade whirled around with her fists raised. Upon seeing the child-looking goddess on her stone bed with her golden bindings, the in-disguise elderly woman's eyebrow rose, but her stance never wavered. Who the hell are you? Would you like the long version or the short? Present. Artemis told Tsunade her full story, figuring lying would get her nowhere at that point. Sadly for her, while the medic believed the part on how she got chained to the seal, the rest was considered pure imagination. Tsunade had ended up deeming her as the result of a split personality that had fully developed into a different person, with her unique chakra being simply an unusual mixture of Naruto's and Kyuubi's. On the plus side though, she was deemed not a threat and Naruto was released from the hospital with some meds to help with his sleeping issue. Though it did come with the condition that Shizen check up on the duo regularly, something Naruto was really happy about and Artemis didn't mind much. That is understandable, but I would still prefer if you referred to me by my name, Artemis said plainly before Naruto's eyes reverted to normal. Blinking a few times then squinting slightly, the blonde's hand quickly rose to rub his head while an annoyed groan escaped his lips. Would you please warn me before you do that? Gives me a headache from hell when you don't. He mentally grumbled. Oh, it isn't that bad, now quit your griping and hurry up, unless you want to be late," Artemis said back, making Naruto snap to attention. "Oh crap! I almost forgot!" he shouted, grabbing his plate and quickly wolfing down the contents. He then ran into his room and swiftly changed into his usual outfit, only now having a pair of dagger holsters that hung empty around his waist. Rushing back out, he gave Shizen another hug before heading for the door. "I'll see you later, Shizen-ichan," Naruto yelled with a wave. "Of course, Otuto, don't forget the deal," Shizen called to him, getting a thumbs up from the whiskered blonde just as the door closed. Said deal was simply, if Naruto could do well enough on every other portion of the final ninja exam, then the third would excuse his inability to do the Bunshin no Jutsu and allow him to graduate. It was an idea proposed by Shizen herself after seeing how badly the boy struggled with chakra control thanks to his much larger than average reserves of chakra. Even with all the usual glares and dark whispers around him, Naruto didn't drop the smirk from his face as he rushed through town. He was confident he could pass this time as both Shizen and Artemis had given him tips on physical practice, and while he was still terrible at written tests, Artemis could cover for him there thanks to the mass amounts of studying she had done through Naruto while trying to figure out how to get back home. Speaking of which, ever since she'd taken a look at a map of the elemental nations, the goddess of the hunt had the feeling she was much farther away from home than a simple boat ride could cover. This feeling was further cemented when Artemis was unable to find a single recognizable constellation in the night sky the entire year she'd been in this situation, and given she was responsible for making about 2/3 of them, that was a very big deal. She knew there was the possibility of other worlds. As a goddess, the impossible for most was a very real possibility for Artemis, but never in her long life had she or any of her siblings had ever actually gone to one before. The likelihood that she was actually trapped in one of these alternate worlds only became higher and higher as each day passed as she learned more about her current surroundings. Back to topic, Naruto finally arrived at the academy with some time to spare, so he slowed his pace to walk as he entered through the main doors. Passing through the various hallways, he soon found himself inside the familiar classroom he'd been educated in for the last year. Half the seats were filled already, but with a quick glance around the room he spotted his lazy buddy Shikamaru at one of the back seats, already asleep. Taking a seat next to him, the ponytailed boy briefly opened one eye a quarter of the way, just enough to confirm who was next to him before going back to sleep. Not long after that, Choji, a plump boy with a kind heart, and Kiba, a feral-looking boy with red tattoos on his face and a small white puppy in his arms, arrived and took the seats on Shikamaru's other side and in front of Naruto respectively. Then just 5 minutes before class started, Sasuke, a broody angsty boy with hair shaped like a duck's ass, showed up with an irritated look. That irritation was soon explained as a group of girls followed in from behind him and repeatedly professing their love for him. The ever-dreaded fangirls, led by Ino, a pretty blonde girl, and Sakura, a smart pink-haired girl and Naruto's crush. As soon as he arrived, Sasuke shot across the room and took the only unoccupied space with no opening around it, which happened to be right next to Naruto. This caused the horde of hormonal girls to groan as one while slowly dispersing into their seats, with some occasionally sending glares at the whiskered boy like it was somehow his fault. Having dealt with worse all his life though, Naruto was easily able to ignore the angry looks as Irako walked into the room and gave his usual speech before quickly passing out the written portion of the test with his assistant Mizuki. "Looks like you're up, Artemis," Naruto thought as his eyes switched to silver again, and he raised his pen. "You may start your test, now." Chapter 4. A solitary target swung through the air in an erratic pattern between several trees. It was held up by a thin, almost invisible wire that lightly glinted in the sunlight. The target itself was just barely the size of a person's palm with the 3 separate black and white rings. Whoosh thump. And now had an arrow embedded deeply into it that pinned it to the tree it was tied to, just missing the bullseye by a few centimeters. Meanwhile, a little over 200 yards away, Naruto gave a small cheer as he lowered his arms. He was wielding a plain wooden bow that Artemis had helped him make, and a quiver of arrows rested against his thigh. He was still wearing the same clothes as earlier, the only difference being a blue headband with a metal plate depicting a stylized leaf wrapped around his noggin. You're improving well, but you still need to work on lining up your shots faster," Artemis said, her voice stern but with a bit of pride edging it. Naruto just grinned brightly at that, used to her half-compliments. Besides, he was still in a good mood from passing the final exam yesterday. "That's the understatement of the century. Remember when you first tried to teach me archery?" he asked with a grin. "Humph, how could I forget? You missed your first shot by a mile, and the arrow somehow ended up hitting that annoying old pervert right in the ass," Artemis said with a chuckle while Naruto burst into laughter. "Oh man, Ero-Sennin was so pissed about that. Thank Kami he fell for the Oroku no Jutsu, sexy technique. Naruto thought as the moon goddess's smirk dropped, and she growled lightly. "While I admit it does have its uses, I still despise that invention of yours," she said, her teeth grinding together in irritation. Truthfully, the only reason she even tolerated that jutsu was the fact that her landlord was as dense as a diamond and tended completely miss anything perverted, or love-related in general, unless it was blatantly said to him. A prime example being his total obliviousness towards a certain blue-haired fellow student's infatuation with him. Speaking of which, one Hinata Hyuga, a fellow graduate of Naruto's class, slowly walked into view with a paper bag in her arms as Naruto was lining up with another target that was a bit closer. She had short bluish-black hair, pale lavender eyes that had no pupils, and a thin scar across her left cheek. Her clothes consisted of a thick baggy gray coat, a pair of dark blue pants that went 3/4 of the way down her legs, and an identical headband around her neck. The short blonde only noticed her arrival after he'd fired again, and was reaching for another arrow. "Oh! Hey Hinata-chan, you're early," he said exuberantly, slipping his arm through his bow so the string rested against his chest and the body against his back before pulling the girl into a one-armed hug. About a month ago, Naruto had been training in this same area when he had heard a branch breaking behind him and shot at it on reflex. It was fortunate that his aim had been off on that day, as it was Hinata who had made the noise while stocky observing her crush. His shot wasn't a complete miss, however, and had instead ended up slicing her cheek pretty badly. Horrified with what he'd done, the blonde redhead had apologized profusely to the poor girl, only to freak out even more when she suddenly fainted when he got close. Not knowing what else to do, and Artemis not having any better ideas, Naruto held Hinata in a bridal carry and took her to Shizen. There were a few complications along the way. Turns out carrying an unconscious and bleeding heiress while hauling ass towards the hospital can look pretty bad out of context, but he eventually got there. Sadly, while Shizen was easily able to treat the injury because of the delay, wasn't able to prevent it from scarring, thus making Naruto feel even worse. To make it up to the Bluenet, he told her he'd do whatever she wanted for a whole month. To which she promptly passed out again, only this time from a massive nosebleed. After she'd calmed down a bit, Hinata accepted Naruto's offer, but so far had only made 2 requests. The first was that he had to take her out to her favorite bakery where they shared a plate of fresh cinnamon buns, and the second was that they would have lunch together every other day. "Hello, Naruto-kun," Hinata stuttered meekly as her face turning a bright crimson and steam shot from her ears. Thankfully, after having spent almost an entire month hanging out with her crush on a regular basis, the shy girl was able to stop herself from passing out. I figured that since WWE both G graduated yesterday, WWE could GG go see celebrate A after an early lunch. That sounds like an awesome idea. What do you have in mind? Naruto asked cheerfully as he pulled away from the flustered girl and sat down against a nearby tree. IW was thinking that we CC could maybe we could GG go to the MM movies for a date. Hinata finished mentally as she struggled to stay awake by focusing on preparing the food she brought with her in the bag, thus missing when Naruto winced slightly at her suggestion. "Oh, yeah, about that. I'm kinda not allowed in any of the movie theaters," he mumbled out with a sigh. His good mood diminished slightly as he accepted a cup of sweet tea and some rice balls that she offered him. "Ah, really?" Hinata asked in surprise, getting a slow nod in response. "Why?" "I'm honestly not sure," Naruto said with a shrug. "Every time I've tried to go to one, the employees kick me out while saying I would cause or was causing trouble. Last time it had been how he had supposedly making too much noise during a movie, which actually would have been believable if it wasn't for the fact he hadn't even purchased a ticket yet. Well, I'm sure it will be okay if I'm with you," Hinata said optimistically. She was the heiress of one of the most prodigious clans of the entire village, so it was highly unlikely they would turn her down. "All right then, if you insist," Naruto said, feeling a little uneasy at basically using Hinata's status to get something but would go with it since it was her idea. Though that didn't stop him from pulling the girl into another one-armed hug, causing her to squeak adorably. "You know, you are such a sweet girl, Hinata. I'm amazed you're still single. Anyone would be really lucky to have you as a girlfriend," he told her while taking a sip of his tea, completely missing as Hinata's face invented a new shade of red. "Girlfriend? Is he asking me out?" Hinata mentally shouted as her mind only registered the "have you as a girlfriend" part. Her thoughts were flooded with imaginative scenarios of her and the boy hugging her on various dates, with each one becoming more and more romantic. It quickly became too much for the poor girl and she promptly passed out with steam flooding from her head. Feeling her suddenly go limp against him, Naruto looked down at Hinata with a tilted head. She should really go see a doctor about her fainting spells, he thought with a sigh, having gotten used to the brunette's habit of falling unconscious at random times. Meanwhile, inside his soul Artemis was face-palming at the utter obliviousness of her vessel. He can never be allowed to meet Aphrodite ever. A goddess of love meeting a boy almost completely ignorant of love. Yeah, her fellow Olympian would stop at absolutely nothing to ensure he was properly educated. Of course, she'd have to do it without her fancy tricks, as those only worked on someone who was properly aware of romantic love, a flaw Aphrodite put into her own magic so that she wouldn't accidentally affect young children. Hey, even she had standards and taboos she wouldn't cross. Anyway, back in the real world Naruto carefully stood up, making sure not to jostle Hinata and gently setting her against the tree. Once he was free, he stretched a little bit before walking over to a very battered-up log that had been stuck into the ground and carved into the rough likeness of a person. "So how are the sets going to be today?" he asked while reaching to the empty holsters at his hips just as they were enveloped in a brief flash of silver light. When it cleared, he had his hands clasped around a pair of ivory handles as he drew two long, slightly curved, hooked silver blades. These were the dancing lunar blades, Artemis's backup knives that she'd reluctantly allowed Naruto to use on the condition that he did exactly as she instructed while teaching him to use them. 3 sets of 200 rising diagonal slashes, then we'll go over vital and joint strikes. When they had first started training, Artemis had tried to teach him the same way as her hunters. This didn't last very long though Naruto lacked the natural flexibility and nimbleness that she was used to working with and ended up throwing his back out. So, she was stuck teaching him basic knife skills, archery training, and muscle memory with a few more advanced tricks she'd managed to rework. By the time Hinata awoke from her nap, Naruto had finished his workout and after agreeing on a meet-up point, the Autumn Leaf Theater, the duo split up to get ready. Naruto headed to his place to take a bath and change, while Hinata rushed off to get advice from the only person she could think of. 20 minutes later, Yamanaka Flower Shop. "You're going out on a date?" One Ino Yamanaka, supposed date exert and gossip queen of Konoha, squealed as she rushed out from behind the counter she was manning and got right in a blushing Hinata's face. "With who? When is it? What are you going to wear?" she demanded, grabbing the shy girl by the shoulders and shaking her like a ragdoll. 2 AFLLSKFGLLFWRJ. Unfortunately, Hinata's natural stuttering combined with the shaking meant that every word she tried to say came out as a garbled mess. She'd only managed to get out that she was going to the movies with someone when Ino went apeshit on her. This was the sight Ino's mother, a brown-haired, brown-eyed woman wearing a forest green dress, was greeted with when she walked in from the back with a gardenia bush in her arms. Giggling at her daughter's antics, Mrs. Yamanaka set the plant down in its proper place before walking over and prying the blonde off. "Ino dear, please refrain from violently shaking our customers," she said in a sickly sweet tone, making Ino shiver and violently nod while in her mother's grip as she was set back down behind the register. "Now could you explain to me what exactly is going on here and who this is?" "Oh, this is Hinata. she's from my class and she's going on a date today," Ino said with another squeal. Hinata meanwhile became even more flustered when Mrs. Yamanaka shifted her gaze over to her. "And let me guess, you figured with how much my daughter talks about romance she would have some good advice to help out." When the shy Hyuga slowly nodded her head, the woman smiled cheerily while grasping the girl's shoulder. "Well, since Ino is busy with her shift, I'll just have to fill in for her, but let's talk about this at my home where there aren't any eavesdropping blabbermouths," Mrs. Yamanaka said while sending a pointed look towards the innocently whistling blonde behind the counter as she led Hinata out of the shop. "I really hope this is worth it," Hinata thought worriedly. "I wonder what Naruto is doing right now." As soon as she and Mrs. Yamanaka were out of sight, Ino immediately rushed to the door and flipped the sign from open to closed before rushing out the door. "Must find out which theaters are open today. There is no way I am missing gossip as juicy as this." Meanwhile, Naruto's apartment. "I don't get why I have to dress differently, Ardine. We're just going to watch a movie together," Naruto grumbled, shaking the water out of his hair before he put on a plain black t-shirt. "I never understood the reasoning either, but it is apparently the proper thing to do," Artemis said back, having never had to deal with or worry about the romantic does and don't herself for very obvious reasons. So, her advice was limited to the few snippets she could remember from Aphrodite and her brother Apollo constantly talking about, something she would deny afterward till the day she faded. "Never in a million years did I think I'd actually be helping a male get ready for a date, especially one who still hadn't realized he was going on one," Artemis thought with a deadpan. Sure, she could have told him herself, but found it highly unlikely he would even believe her, and she was maybe kinda hoping to recruit the heiress as one of her hunters once she got loose from her imprisonment. With her Byakugans, the Hyuga family Kekii Genkai, bloodline limit, 360 vision, ability to see through solid objects, and long-range sight, Hinata had the potential to be one of the best archers Artemis had ever seen. But the moon goddess wasn't low enough to actively sabotage the two's chance together. So she settled for just keeping quiet and letting things play out. Besides, she was confident that Naruto's ignorance would eventually cause Hinata to give up sooner or later. "Whatever, at least it isn't some stuffy old formal kimono," Naruto said while slipping on a pair of slightly baggy orange pants with dark blue highlights. Agreed. One of the times Artemis had synced, aka willingly possessed, with Naruto was during a large festival a few months back. Shizen had been with them, and had insisted that Naruto wear an appropriate attire for it. She had been tired of Naruto complaining about it, and had offered to switch places just to shut him up. Not even 5 minutes later Artemis relinquished control and retreated to her more comfortable bindings, not able to stand the itching, restrictive, and stuffy outfit a second longer. After strapping on his sandals and taking a quick glance at the clock, Naruto saw he had about half an hour before he needed to meet up with Hinata. Hey Ardine, any ideas what to do for the next 30 minutes? Perhaps you should get a gift for Hinata, Artemis suggested after a brief pause, not knowing what else to say. You are going out to celebrate graduation after all. Naruto considered this for a moment before nodding in agreement. Yeah, I could get her some cinnamon buns from her favorite bakery. Thanks Artemis Nay, he said cheerily while leaving his apartment. Don't mention it. Seriously don't, ever. The goddess said dully, getting a laugh from the blonde as he jogged through the streets of Konoha at a casual pace. Relax, your secret is safe with M-Oof. Gah! Naruto was cut off mid-thought when someone crashed into his side as he was at a cross-section. Caught off guard, he was knocked clean off his feet and set tumbling several yards across the ground before skidding to a stop on his back. Once the shock of impact wore off and his brain caught up with what just happened, Naruto found blinking in surprise as he stared directly into the vibrant greenish-blue eyes of Ino as she straddled his lap. Talk about deja vu, Artemis deadpanned. How the hell does he get into these kinds of situations? Hi Ino? Naruto said nervously as he made sure to keep his arms firmly at his sides. Oh, hey Naruto, Ino said in a dismissive tone as she quickly got back on her feet. Sorry, can't deal with your dumbness now. Have to find out where Hinata's date is going to be. Naruto felt his temper flare at how casually she'd insulted him, but was immediately broken from his anger when he heard her mumble that last bit while walking away. Wait, what do you mean Hinata's date? How could she be going on a date when me and her are going to the movies in half an hour? He asked as he stood up and dusted himself off, causing Ino to freeze mid-step. What did you just say? She asked back as her head slowly turned to face him with a rusty creaking noise. Naruto felt a sudden nervousness wash over him as Ino's gaze bore into him. Like heck, she was trying to read his thoughts just by staring at him hard enough. Me and Hinata are going to the movies Soichiwai. He yelled indignantly as his fellow blonde grabbed him by the collar and started dragging him off. Let me go! No way! This is the juiciest news I've heard in ages, and this time I am not gonna miss out on it, Ino said as she pulled him into the closest alley and pushed him against the wall. Now tell me everything. Chapter 5. Wait, what do you mean Hinata's date? How could she be going on a date when me and her are going to the movies in half an hour? He asked as he stood up and dusted himself off, causing Ino to freeze mid-step. What did you just say? She asked back as her head slowly turned to face him with a rusty creaking noise. Naruto felt a sudden nervousness wash over him as Ino's gaze bore into him. Like heck, she was trying to read his thoughts just by staring at him hard enough. Me and Hinata are going to the movies Soichiwai. He yelled indignantly as his fellow blonde grabbed him by the collar and started dragging him off. Let me go! No way! This is the juiciest news I've heard in ages, and this time I am not gonna miss out on it, Ino said as she pulled him into the closest alley and pushed him against the wall. Now tell me everything. And now. Hinata and Naruto exited the Autumn Leaf Theater, a tall building with a variety of red, orange, and yellow colors fitting the season of fall, laughing happily as they discussed the movie they watched. Kronos Goes to Ninja Academy and finished off their bucket of popcorn. Like Hinata had expected, despite their intense dislike for her blonde crush, the majority of the staff for the theater immediately backed off from their attempts to kick him out when she explained that he was with her. The only one who didn't seem to get the message was the ticket checker at the entrance door, but he was promptly fired by the manager for doing something as stupid as trying to kick out the heiress of the prodigious Hyuga clan of all people. Speaking of Hinata, she was thankful for Mrs. Yamanaka's advice on what to do on the date, even if it could be summed up as being herself with a few little extra tidbits here and there. At the same time, though, she was extremely nervous inside as Naruto had told her about his run-in with Ino. If there was any moment she hated the blonde redhead's extreme denseness the most, it would have been right then and there, as it turned out he had told the gossip queen of Konoha all about their time together. Flashback. You two have been going out for a month, Ino exclaimed in surprise, finally releasing her grip from Naruto's shirt after she managed to coerce the whole story out of him. For the last time, we aren't dating. I'm just making up for accidentally hurting Hinata while I was training, Naruto said again, only for his words to be completely ignored as Ino was now in full-blown gossip mode. Oh. This explains why Hinata's been acting so oddly recently. I thought she'd just been becoming more confident, or maybe seeing a therapist. But this, she ranted, running her hands through her hair as she paced back and forth. I never expected Miss Can't Speak Louder Than a Mouse of all people to manage to get together with someone before myself, and with you of all people, she mumbled, looking Naruto over dubiously. Hey! What's wrong with dating me? Naruto asked indignantly, getting in his fellow blonde's face as his irritation towards her earlier insults flaring back up. This actually seemed to knock Ino back to reality finally as she looked at Naruto with a blank expression while rolling her eyes. You're super annoying, always pulling stupid pranks and goofing off, and the dead last of our class. Should I go on? She asked rhetorically, before blinking in surprise when instead of responding verbally Naruto started digging around in his pockets. Finding what he was looking for after a few moments, Naruto pulled out a folded-up piece of paper and promptly shoved it into Ino's hands before pushing her out of the way and marching off angrily. Confused at what that was all about, Ino shrugged it off and looked down at the parchment now in her grasp. After a brief mental debate, her curiosity won out, and she unfolded said paper. As soon as her gaze made contact with the content written upon the page, though, the gossiper's jaw fell straight to the ground, the rest of her not far behind as she fainted. End flashback. while also upset at Ino for insulting her crush so blatantly. When Naruto had told Hinata what was on the paper he'd given her, she had felt much better, and had even laughed a little. You see, after announcing the day everyone would come back to be put into teams, Irika had passed out report cards detailing how well someone had done on the test, and what rank they got in class. Ino had gotten ranked 8th place overall. This was something she'd been bragging about, as the only girls who'd gotten higher than her were Hinata herself, who beat her in the physical aspect, and Sakura, who beat her in the theoretical aspect. What Ino hadn't known until now, however, was that Naruto, the person she had insulted for being stupid and dead last, had gotten 7th place in the final rankings. Oh, she could imagine that drama queen's reaction already. This has been an awesome night, I'm glad you talked me into this, Naruto said while giving Hinata a one-armed hug. We should do this again sometime. While glowing red from a blush, both from the hug and the blonde's thoughtless words, Hinata managed to keep herself calm with a few discreet deep breaths. Another tip from Mrs. Yamanaka. How about after we get assigned to T-teams? She suggested, mental grumbling when Naruto broke the hug until he turned to her with his trademark foxy smile. That sounds great, we could even invite some of our friends while we're at it then, he said happily, missing the slight disappointment on Hinata's face since his eyes were closed. She was about to respond when Naruto suddenly stopped with a shiver before looking up to the sky. Following his gaze curiously, she blinked in surprise when she saw the moon just starting to peek out over the horizon. It's getting pretty late, we should be heading home soon, Naruto stated, trying to ignore the sudden rush of energy he'd felt the instant the moon's soft rays touched his skin. It happened every night, and was the main reason he had such difficulty sleeping, with it being the strongest during the full moon and weakest on a new moon. Hinata nodded in agreement, knowing how her father would get if she stayed out too late. While not the most vocal about it, Hayashi Hyuga did care deeply about her, and would no doubt be very concerned over her unexplained absence. So, with a good amount of reluctance, she meekly bid Naruto good night, and hurried off to the Hyuga compound before such an event could happen. Meanwhile, Naruto, after a brief mental conversation with Artemis, decided to go back to his training ground and burn off the extra steam he got before calling it a night. Besides, even though he graduated didn't mean he could slack off, especially since he still wanted to be Hokage one day. 5 days later, Academy. The entire classroom buzzed with chatter as the newly minted genin talked excitedly in their seats. Naruto was sitting near the window with Sasuke on one side using him as a fangirl barrier and Hinata on the other. Kiba, Choji, and Shikamaru sat in front of them with the later dead asleep already. Behind them was Shino and 2 random boys, and to the side of them was Sakura, Ino and a horde of arguing fangirls. Most were discussing about who they thought or wanted to be teamed up with, the exceptions being Naruto, who was focused on calming down Artemis as she raged about how the fangirls were making women look pathetic, and said fangirls themselves. They were more focused on arguing over a certain duck-butt-haired brooding Uchiha, with Sakura easily being the most vocal. Or at least she was, until the Pinkette noticed a complete lack of reaction from her rival Ino, who was just sitting in her spot while staring at the report card Naruto had given her with a look of denial. Naturally curious on what could possibly distract the platinum blonde from their precious Sasuke-kun, Sakura peered over her shoulder and started reading for herself. Uzumaki Naruto. Written exam, 91%. Taijutsu exam, 89%. Kunai throwing, 9 out of 10. Shuriken throwing, 8 out of 10. Ninjutsu exam, 2/3. Final results, 82%. Class ranking 7th. Ino, what are you doing with Naruto Baka's exam results? Sakura asked in confusion before a certain fact popped in her head. Wait a second, didn't you get ranked 8th? That would mean... She trailed off as the answer dawned on her, swiftly followed by an outburst of laughter as she fell into her seat while holding her sides. Wahahoho! You got a lower grade than Naruto of all people, she said between laughs, drawing the other girl's attention. Faster than you could blink, Sakura's laughter turned into yelps of pain as she was knocked out of her seat and trampled by the horde of females that crowded around Ino and gaped at the sheet in her hands, then at Naruto, as he rubbed his head in irritation. Naruto sighed in relief as he finally managed to get Artemis to relax with the promise of letting her have full control Saturday night for a hunting trip and a long soak at the hot springs. Before he could relax, however, he felt a sudden chill run down his spine as a shadow fell over him. Looking up, he blinked in surprise when he found himself surrounded by the girls of his class, each one glowering down at him while cracking their knuckles threateningly. Can I help you with something?" Naruto asked slightly nervously, discreetly doing the hand signs for the kawarimi under the desk just in case. Thankfully, before the angry fangirls could try anything, Irika entered the room. "All right, everyone, take your seats and quiet down," the man said as he walked over to his desk, only for his to start twitching as he was completely ignored. "I said, sit down and shut up," he yelled, making everyone jump before scrambling to their seats. Once they were all properly seated, Irika quickly double-checked that everyone was present before pulling out the scroll with the teams listed on them. "Now, before I start with team assignments, and before any of you ask, Mizuki will not be joining us due to medical issues," Irika stated, getting a few curious looks, but most didn't really care as not many really liked the white-haired teacher. Of course, even if he did show up, no one would recognize him after what happened to him last week after the ninja exams. He'd apparently tried to break into the Hokage vault and steal the scroll of seals right during the night, only to get caught red-handed by Tsunade when she showed up to drop off her biweekly medical reports from the hospital. The end results were Konoha Hospital. In the intensive care wing, what could only be described as a mummy lied on one of the beds with an air mask and heart monitor attached to it showing it was still alive. This was especially clear when a certain busted blonde walked in and the heart monitor started beeping rapidly. It then practically overloaded when Tsunade was joined by a purple-haired, brown-eyed woman wearing a large open tan trench coat showing her scantily clad form with a smirk and a really big needle in her hands full of an unknown clear fluid. "Now, Mizuki, you're going to tell us everything we need to know," the unknown woman said with a sadistic grin as she pointed the needle at him. "And don't worry, this will only hurt a lot." Academy? Not pretty, to say the least. "Anyway, to the reason all of you are here," Irika said as he unrolled the scroll in his hands and everyone began paying rapt attention. "Team 1 will is K fast-forwarding sound effect. Team 7 is Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Shikamaru Nara. Your team leader is Kakashi Hatake," Irika said, rolling his eyes at the cheer, muffled groan, and snore he got in response before continuing. "Team 8 is Kiba Inuzuka, Hinata Hyuga, and Shino Aburame with Kurenai Yuhi as your leader." Kiba whooped happily as his puppy Akamaru woofed. Shino had no visible reaction, and Hinata just looked glum at the fact she wouldn't be on the same team as Naruto. Team 9 is still in circulation. Finally, Team 10 will be Choji Akimichi, Ino Yamanaka, and Naruto Uzumaki. Your team leader is Asuma Sarutobi. Naruto, while a little saddened that he wasn't on the same team as either Sakura or Hinata, still smiled cheerfully as he high-fived Choji and accepted the small bag of chips the big-boned boy offered him. Ino finally seemed to snap out of her daze, and opened her mouth to start bitching, but a sharp look from Irika shut her right up. "Sensei, why do I have to be paired up with this lazy idiot? He'll just drag me and Sasuke down with his slothfulness." The same could not be said for Sakura, however. "For a very simple reason, Sakura," Irika said in his patented lecture voice, "the teams are specifically set up to be as balanced as possible. For example, we traditionally have the 2 highest scoring students," he gestures to the Pinkette and Sasuke, "and the lowest scoring student asterisk." Irika points to Shikamaru, who's still snoring away. "Put on the same team to balance to both encourage the failing student to do better and keep the better students from getting too high in ego. A smart idea. Many strong or intelligent men and women have gotten themselves and others killed due to a swelled head," Artemis said to Naruto solemnly, having seen such cases many times in her long lifespan. One example was a daughter of Athena she had only just recruited in the 1800s who'd gotten herself and 3 other hunters eaten by a cyclops after arrogantly believing she could defeat the monster on her own with her inherited high intelligence. Naruto nodded at that, but didn't say anything as he knew he tended to get cocky and overconfident during a fight himself. He was a little better than he used to be, though, thanks to Artemis's words of wisdom, and Tsunade literally beating some humility into him every once in a while. With that all cleared up, please wait here until your new Kyoshi teachers arrive here shortly for your first team meetings, Irika told them while rolling up the team list scroll and heading for the door. Just before he left, though, the nose-scarred man turned back to the class and bowed. It has been my honor teaching you, and I wish you all the best of luck. With his piece said, Irika exited the classroom, leaving behind a complete silence that held the room for several moments before the door opened again and two people stepped inside. The first was a man with black hair and beard, tan skin, and a cigarette in his mouth, while the other was a woman who was also black-haired, with pale skin and striking red eyes. "Teammate with me," the woman said with a wave of her arm, only having to wait a few seconds before Hinata, Shino, and a visibly drooling Kiba stood in front of her before heading right back out the door again with her team in tow. The man, on the other hand, seemed content to just stand there and finish his cigarette. Once he was down to the butt, he spat it out and smothered it with his foot before smiling lightly. "I'm here for Team 10, please follow me." That's it for part 1. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.